Well, we'll go ahead and get things started. It's about 7:05, so perfect timing. I want to thank all of y'all for joining us today. This is going to be something very unique and exciting for Charge Up in our series of Building the Champion's Mindset. Uh, I have had the opportunity to sit and talk with Dr. McCabe, and this is somebody that I've been following for a couple of years. So to have him a part of today's show is extremely humbling. Just to give you a little bit of background, Dr. McCabe is a graduate of LSU, where he also lettered all 4 years as a pitcher on the Tigers baseball team. Now, what's amazing is during that time, he also got to two national championships, hard earned, three SEC championships, and he was in three College World Series games. He's the author of The Mindset Manifesto, one of my favorite books, as well as the Game Plan book, workbook for athletes. So he works not only with Fortune 500 companies, but the exciting part to me and the draw that I had was he works with not only the NFL and the NBA players and teams, but he became such an icon within the PGA with players, and his respect level by players you have heard of on the professional circuit is extremely admirable. Where we met is him working now with the University of Alabama and their program, which I know you probably have heard they're kind of successful. And so going to Tuscaloosa and having the opportunity to meet with Dr. McCabe was really exciting because I not only religiously listen to his podcasts, but I also read what he puts out. I watch a lot of the videos, and it's just an incredible amount of information that I have benefited from, and I can see exactly where the student athletes and coaches have the same opportunity to benefit and to grow. So I want to thank you, Dr. McCabe, for being a part of the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So our goal today is going to be to cover a few topics around what Dr. McCabe has invested his life work into, and that's working with athletes to develop a high performance mindset. We'll spend about 30 minutes on some questions that I've prepared, and then we're going to open it up for more questions from you. And this is an incredible opportunity to ask the questions based on you as a player and or you as a coach on relevant thoughts with what's going on right now, as well as, I don't want to call it the new normal because I can't stand that, but what's going to happen after this and how you return and how you keep players mentally prepared as they go through this and as they return, which I'm confident is going to be soon. So with that, we'll kind of start things off here. And let me ask you something, Dr. McCabe. Mindset has become an incredibly big buzzword as of late, but I still think we're such a long way from directing the proper amount of time and attention toward the skill. I feel like mind is the strongest predictor of performance. So in my mind, that lends credibility toward investing the time as a coach or a player in it. But I still feel like it's ignored by so many teams. Do you believe that having that firm foundation and understanding of what you call a high performance mindset is what separates the good from the great teams?
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of ways to incorporate it. Okay, so you can have certain teams and organizations where the coaching staff naturally brings it in as part of everything that they do. So it helps form their practice plans, their player development plans. They're really consistent in their philosophy, that they communicate in a consistent manner. That, doesn't mean that they don't get, excited or angry, but that the overall scope of where they're trying to go is being driven by the coach. That was the kind of program I was in. Coach Bertman, who was a Hall of Fame coach and 5 national titles in 10 years, was a guy who really ran most of the mental training through his words. But everything he did had an angle to find an extra bullet in the chamber, an extra arrow in the quiver. And we used to focus on a concept called how to win awareness, which was this idea, we called it HWA, But it was that idea as a player to look for that little angle, that little half step, that ability to stand in center field and see that the hitter, the lefty, is a little late on the pitcher and everything is being fouled off to left field. So the center fielder just takes a step over. Okay. It's realizing that the right fielder may have a great arm in going into the hole, but when she's going to the line, she is not as strong of a thrower. So it's knowing when you're rounding second and the ball's going down the right field line that you can take third fairly easily because you've been paying attention. And so we used every day as a learning strategy to develop an advantage over our opponents because we knew that most didn't have the guts or the attention to do it. They would always focus on talent. And so, we'd hear all year long, Florida State has all this talent. Cal State Fullerton is so good. Stanford is so good. But we knew we were geared to win national titles because we did the little things that no one else had the guts to do. We paid as much of attention to pop fly drills as we did taking batting practice. Now, that didn't come from the players. That came from our coaching staff who coached that with the same attention. And I try to use an example when I coach and I do corporate talks. And the first thing I try to say is I want you to think about what kind of restaurant you would be. When I was a kid, we used to travel all over the country. And we would drive and we'd stop at McDonald's to go to the bathroom, right? And you go and you get a drink and you go down to the next McDonald's. And McDonald's used to be cleaner than the gas stations. Well, I travel like you do, and I usually go to McDonald's for breakfast. Because believe it or not, if you go into a McDonald's, they'll cook you hand-cracked eggs on their skillet. All you got to do is ask for them. And I like their coffee. Their coffee's $1.07. To me, it's better than Starbucks. I love Diet Coke. I'll drink a ton of them. And, and I like their fountain Diet Coke. So I'll go in there, I'll get eggs and sausage. And it gives me a chance just to kind of wake up in the morning and get focused. When I go into a McDonald's, I never know what I'm going to get. You walk in and the floor may be wet. And it may be 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And I walk in and I order. And I usually have to kind of look for somebody to order. And I'll ask for eggs, and I'll say hand cracked, and they'll be like, no, we don't do those here. Okay. Then, you go get your coffee, you go get your Coke, and you go put it underneath the fountain, and the fountain thing is dirty, right? And then you go look at the garbage can, and it's packed at 5:30 in the morning, and the tables are dirty. And you go in the bathroom, and the floor's wet. And it's like, who didn't do their job, or who doesn't care enough about the details, okay? We all know McDonald's ice cream machines are never working, okay? They never work, okay? But Chick-fil-A has the same challenge. But every Chick-fil-A I go into, I know what I'm getting. Can I serve you? It's my pleasure. Their food is always hot. Their ketchup dispenser has never got ketchup on it. In fact, it's always organized. Their condiment station and their straws are perfect. They ask for your name. You're not a number. Okay, you go through the drive-thru, there'll be 40 cars. You'll get out of there in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You go to McDonald's, you're going to get the wrong order. Okay? The difference between the two is an attitude. And that attitude choice is not easy. See, it's the unrequired to make a choice like that. See, in McDonald's, they always believe that somebody else is going to come behind them and do the job. At Chick-fil-A, it's everybody's job. And so when we played baseball, we rarely got dressed in the dugout. We showed up ready to go. Now, our shoes weren't painted black every day, and our hats had sweat stains on them. But we took batting practice with purpose. And our field, when our visitors showed up, we wanted them to be in awe of Alex Box Stadium because we wanted them to look in their dugout and realize that the wood wasn't splintered because some guy had hit it. Instead, it was fixed and it was painted. Because if we paid that much attention to those details, imagine the other details that we took advantage of. Okay? And I think there are other teams where you could have, like Coach Murphy at Alabama has a great, I do a lot of work with his individual players. He brings in a lot of speakers. You know that. He opens up his team to access, but he also maintains a certain level, but he also allows other people in there. Coach Saban at Alabama. There's numerous ones of us in there. Okay, we all have different roles. My specialty is working with injured athletes and athletes that are struggling and high-profile ones. Okay, but I'm not up there talking to Coach Saban every day. Like, that's not my deal. And I think great teams know what we have to do to get better. Well, great athletes do too. I have what I call the success formula. And the success formula is this. Everybody is working to improve their skills and talent. That's the first factor. It's really hard to compete and win if you don't have talent. I mean, our coach used to laugh and say, you know, I'll take you guys to go get ice cream. Those who hit the mouth can play baseball. Those who hit their forehead probably going to play another sport. Okay? You've got to have a certain baseline level of talent. Okay? And we should improve that every day. But talent is not a modeling contest. It's not a pageant. Okay? We don't roll the car out on stage and go, wow, look how pretty it is. Talent is about getting it done for the second factor, which is under pressure. Okay? When it's hard. When you've got a runner on third and less than 2 outs, can you get the runner in? When the umpire's strike zone is expanding, can you stay in the fight? Okay? It's when it matters the most. Well, you're not born able to do things under pressure. Okay? You learn how to be under pressure by going under pressure, challenging yourself under pressure, failing under pressure, getting hungry to come back under pressure. Okay? Nobody's born a high-pressure player. In fact, nobody gets better under pressure. What we deem the best of the best, they play at their norm under pressure. They don't outperform their best under pressure. Okay? Pressure's harder. The third factor is your mental flexibility. Your ability to navigate the good, the bad, to always come back to the purpose at hand. I can be as upset as anybody else. Can I get back to the purpose? And can I be, I can't say if I had a bad call that it's not going to stay with me. But I can say it may stay with me, but I can still find the purpose in the next play. If I make an error, don't say you're sorry. Don't. Okay, if you need to say sorry, everybody go around the huddle before the game and say sorry. Okay, point done. We're done being sorry. Now, show up on the next play, right? If you're 0 for 3, do something. If you play other sports in soccer and a person beats you and you fail on the defense, you know what you do? You win the next one. Okay, it's not about making up for it because that next challenge is completely independent of the previous one. Only you bring the negative emotions to it. So you can stay mentally flexible. That means you could have a good day and you can accept that some days you're going to be really good and some days it's going to be really hard. But who's the challenger in the moment? Who's the person that shows up ready for what's in front of them? Okay? And then the last factor we can't control, which is circumstance, luck, bad calls, balls hitting the base, a perfectly placed ball off the end of the bat, a rocket that hits the glove of the defender. I mean, those happen, okay? But you gotta allow yourself to experience emotion. Just never do anything that disrespects your team, your family, your maker, your organization, the opponent. But show back up and get ready for the next one.
Absolutely. I love the analogy between you started with the restaurant and then turned it into the sport. And it's so true because a prototype is easy to construct. A prototype is at 20,000 feet, and everybody is going to assume that it holds everything that all of the other ones do. But it's when you go deep inside and really look and open the doors that you begin to learn if there is a culture of pride within that prototype. With my father in the restaurant business, every macaroni grill looked the same. But that's not what he focused on. They're going to look the same. He needed the people to act the same. That way, when you walked in, you knew exactly what you were going to get. There were going to be no shortcuts, and it was going to be a personal experience. The same thing goes as I visit teams at the high school and college level. I know what the prototype is based off of the prominence of the program or the respect of the program, but it's when you open the doors that you really make your conclusion. and it's first impressions, and it's through observation. You don't necessarily have to say a word.
Nope.
You can see it and you can feel what's going on. And I think that's something special. And I'm sure with your time at the University of Alabama, there's a different bar for each team that is reached, and the importance that you play. I love the fact that
but I mean, I think the thing too is who sets that bar, right?
Exactly.
The coach can set it, but if it's not driven by the players, then it becomes an adversarial situation.
True.
And that's the hard thing, right? What makes college hard is the person who's, who is pushing so hard, right? And then graduates, and the people that followed, well, they're going to be a different type of leader. All right. So what's the standard that's maintained there? And we want to maintain the culture of the program. Great coaches, great athletes don't need to worry about rules. You don't need to tell me to be on the field 10 minutes early for a 12 o'clock practice. Great players are there 15 minutes early because it's what they need to do to be better. But at the same time, a coach doesn't need to establish that rule, because if somebody doesn't understand it, it's the responsibility of the team to say, hey, look, we start at 12, and if you get here at 12, you're slowing us down. And my freshman year, I was redshirting at LSU. We had 7 major league pitchers on that staff. And early in the thing, we used to hit LSU's old stadium, the good one, was right on this major road that if you hit home runs in right field, it would hit the road and cars would hit it, and you have to go get the ball. It was just a pain. But we had a deal my freshman year that the number of balls we lost in batting practice was the number of poles the pitcher staff had to run after practice. So in addition to your normal running, so nobody wanted to do it. And, we got to a spot as we got bigger and more popular that we'd lose balls on occasion. It was just, you can't help if somebody stops in a car and picks up a ball and drives off. I mean, my goodness, you can't chase them down. But there was a day where a ball was stuck between 3 fences. We had some older fences behind our outfield wall, and a ball had hit and fallen down, and I couldn't get to it. And I went over there and I tried to get it, and I came back in, and Chad Auger, who pitched in the major leagues for the Cleveland Indians and pitched in the Major League World Series and won 2 games in the World Series, he said, go back and get it. And I said, well, I can't get over the fence. He goes, we don't do can't here. So I ran out there and I tried it again. Couldn't get it. Came back in. I said, dude, I can't get it. He goes, you don't understand. You always find a way. Now, I knew in that moment what the standards were. A lot of times on teams, you have people who aren't willing to follow, but you have to have a strong enough culture that can absorb them and not fight them. And so, because we had guys that didn't do what we asked. We just had better players. Not everybody's always going to be 100% online. That's where coaches get upset, is because we look at it and we expect everybody to toe the line. Some people just aren't. I mean, they're bad people. They just have a different view on the world.
Kind of goes back to the saying, successful teams coach themselves. They understand what the responsibilities are, and they uphold that. And what's different with professional athletes and college athletes is, you're right, it's a cycle. So class in, class out. So how do you maintain that? And I think a lot comes with a sense of pride, and that's legacy is a big word. And you can have culture, but do you have legacy?
Yeah. What I try to tell teams is, you're only going to play with this team one time in your life. Okay. And they don't put up statues at most places for second place. They don't celebrate reunions of teams for the third place team. I was on 2 national title teams. Every 5 years, those teams get together in their 5-year increments. My second year, we won the conference, didn't go to the World Series. That team never gets together. My 4th year, we went to the World Series, we got eliminated. That team never gets together. My last year, we were number 1 in the country, and we fell apart. That team never gets together. Okay? We get together for bigger reunions, but we don't get honored. My first 2 teams, we get honored. Mm-hmm. And it was, we had some characters. We had some guys that, we had a lot of fights in the locker room, but we loved each other, but we fought, but we were strong. And, the legacy of what do you want to leave is, how do you want people to talk about you when you leave? And when I was done and I first started out in this industry, I started going, I was talking to college baseball coaches. I was like, what did y'all think about us? Well, y'all are super talented. I'm like, no, we weren't. We really weren't. Like, y'all just always seem to win. Y'all were like unbeatable. I'm like, okay, I can handle that one. People are going to talk about you when they leave. And, one of the things I've heard in softball teams on teams that aren't very good is I hear players say, well, I want them to like us. Why? Why do you want them to like you? I want them to respect you, but you're not having tea and coffee with them. Now, they may be your friends, but I can tell you in competition, I'm going to do everything I can to beat you, but I will pick you up afterwards.
Right.
And I will celebrate your victory too, but I will still be disappointed in my loss. Because a great competitor only makes the competition better if that competition gets your best. So you actually fail your competition if you don't give them your best.
Absolutely. And we've seen it so many times on the past 3 weeks that we're having to watch old games. They're not picking the ones that are boring. They're picking those great games that you can watch on ESPN, even though you've seen it 5 times. You're like, I got to watch this. And to your point, it's two teams who want something so bad that the competitive level is at an all-time high. They're exceeding their own bar. And it's fascinating to watch. So I will say, out of this time of not being able to watch live sports, going back to some of those games has actually been a great lesson again in what is the common thread between those games that they're playing. And it's the competitiveness. If when they put the game on, you actually remember the score.
Yep.
Because that game was so powerful.
But there's a great story of Pete Rose. And Pete Rose is the all-time hits leader in Major League Baseball.
Hall of Fame could be.
He should be in the Hall of Fame, but I mean, he violated some serious rules. Okay. But there was a very famous story of him in the 1975 World Series where the 13th inning game, game 6, Carlton Fisk's home run, right? Game 6? Yeah. Or game 5. It may have been game 5. Anyway, the Red Sox hadn't won a World Series in forever. The Reds were the big red machine. And the game was in extra innings. And player gets to second base and is talking to Pete Rose. He's like, God, this is stressful. Pete Rose goes, stressful? I'm having the time of my life. This is the greatest night I've ever had. Because it was about the hunt, the fight, the challenge, the drill, the intensity of the moment, right? And I think that when people want to put themselves in that situation, they're willing to be vulnerable. We can't be great. The hardest thing that the generation of the young athletes on this call have, the greatest challenge that y'all have is that you don't give everything you have. You hold back. And you hold back a little bit because if you fail and you give everything you have and you fail, the fear is you're not good enough. But you don't even know that. So what you do is you hold a little bit back so when you do fail and struggle, you have an excuse, a reason, an understanding. Okay? And so the problem is we never get your best. Like, you should empty your tank every day in every drill you do. And instead of holding a little back, holding a little back, holding a little back. But that's why I want coaches to always give the players their practice plan for the day too. If I said I'm going to take you out and train you, I don't tell you what I'm going to do, I don't know if it's the last drill. I want you to give me everything you got. So that's the only way you can get better. I want you to go up to the plate and swing with purpose. Slap with purpose. Bunt with purpose. Don't just try to get through it. Okay? The best take ground balls for purpose. And if they make a mistake, if they miss a ground ball, if they miss a cutoff man, they know they did, but the next purpose is not fixing the problem. It's doing it the right way, the way that you were supposed to do it the first time. Sometimes we make mistakes. We're not machines. Okay? So if everything is done with a purpose and everything is empty in the tank, if you fail, I'll pick you up. That's not a problem. But I just can't handle regret.
Exactly. And to tie off of that, as I spend more time with athletes and doing the one-on-one work, it's apparent that once they become a little bit vulnerable and honest with you, you can tell that fear of failure is still such a dominant reaction. It's such a dominant stress that they carry within them. They're equating performance to value. And it's one of those things where I know coaches and programs are putting so much time into explaining to them exactly what you just talked about. and how they have to understand that failure is a lesson. And to your point, you've got to just recover, get back into the game mentally. But what does it take for a student athlete who is stuck in that rut of worrying about failure to overcome it? You talked about it briefly, but what are some habits that, or even procedure that you teach that can help somebody? You talk about the athletes you work with who are injured or just aren't performing and they're frustrated. What about those specific ones with fear of failure?
Well, fear, we don't actually fear failure. We fear the moment we realize we failed. Okay, because once we've hit the bottom, we pick ourselves up amazingly well. Like, most of the things that we're really afraid of, they're really not that bad once we go through them.
Right.
We spend a lot more energy trying to protect against failing than we actually do failing. And that energy creates this really scary position. But here's the deal, right? I don't want you to celebrate failure. I've heard people say celebrate failure, or don't do that. Okay? Deal with it. Deal with it. Learn from it. Learn from others' failures. But don't make failure a good thing. Make failure a survivable thing. Like the things that we fear the most, we can maneuver through. Knock on wood, minus a couple things. Look, Mariano Rivera is the greatest closer in Major League Baseball history, and he blew 2 Game 7s to lose a World Series with the lead. I mean,
you never hear about those things when you talk about it.
People fail. Ricky Anderson is the all-time stolen base king in Major League Baseball. He's also the all-time stolen base caught stealing king in Major League Baseball. Okay? You've got to be willing to go for it. And that's what a lot of people are afraid of, the what if. Well, you know what? The what if, you are built to handle any scenario you put yourself into. If you are willing to stand up to the fire, then you can maneuver through anything. But most of us are so afraid of what the fire is going to expose about us to ourselves that we protect against putting ourselves out there. And then we actually create what we fear. And then instead of learning from it and growing through it, we do everything we can to get out of it. I think there's 2 types of organizations or people. There's reactors and responders. Reactors see threat, problem, failure, and do everything they can to avoid it because they're afraid of what it means about them. Responders see the same threat and challenge and use it to make themselves better. Okay? In this world that we're in right now, there's going to be some companies that are going to get very, very good out of it. Mm-hmm. They're going to see the challenge of the coronavirus, and they're going to get leaner, meaner, and better. And there's going to be others that are waiting for somebody to save them.
Absolutely.
Okay? It's going to happen. There's going to be restaurants that can maneuver just fine through this, and others that are going to come back and have a problem. And I think it comes down to, what do you see the challenge? You're going to go through a slump in a season. The ball is going to look like it's a size of a pea and it's moving in 47 directions. Okay? If you can simplify what you're doing and realize that it will pass. It may seem like it will take forever. Okay? But you keep showing up. When it does pass, you'll be better for it. But what happens is most of us get in a slump and we start changing everything.
Right. Because
we're trying to get out of it as soon as possible instead of enduring what you're going through.
So would you say that vulnerability is really a power that we can use to empower ourselves in these situations?
There's a couple of things that are most powerful. The first most powerful thing we own is our ability to choose our attitude in the moment. Okay? We're not in control of our circumstances. Things happen to us. Sometimes we create the scenarios that put those things in play, but our circumstances, we can't control. We can control how we face it. Mm-hmm. Okay? We also control our willingness to stand up to it. That's the vulnerability.
So let's go into social media, because I'm still convinced that it plays such a large role in the attitudes of student athletes. Research is starting to show that there's a staggering number of teenagers who are actually developing narcissistic behaviors based off social media, but yet they don't even realize it. The other thing that's happening is they're progressing into like an accelerated limited belief system, which we're already fighting. We just talked about it with what they think failure is, but it's that infinite pattern of negative self-talk.
Right.
As a coach, we have a lot of coaches here. What are effective ways to teach them the discipline of thinking different? Reading so much about your high performance mindset and understanding what's involved. It's a process.
Well, first of all, the 21st century athlete is the most innovative, most adaptive, most resourceful athlete we've ever seen. Okay. At the same time, they're not the best at working through problems because Siri, answer this for me, or I can find an answer. Now, the problem too, so they're very quick, fast. They want a quick move. They don't stick with things as long. So as coaches, we got to understand their impatience, right? They're not doing it to tick you off. Right. They're doing it because they're frustrated and they've never been taught how to work through a problem. Okay. Like we used to. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way, but if you learn to play in your backyard, it's a lot different than having a private coach train you all the time. Okay. The other factor though, that is really important is the standards of excellence are a lot different now than they used to be. The standards of excellence are now unbelievable outliers. Okay. Cat Ostermans, we think, are everybody. Montana Fouts at Alabama, we think everybody should be a freshman like that. Okay. Those are outliers. But what happens is because we get exposed to them and we see them so much, we see their social media, they become the standard of what we define ourselves. So everything that we're falling short of, nobody wants to be a late bloomer. Everybody wants to be the bloomer that hit on freshman year and got better every year. Nobody wants to be the player that showed up on their junior year and figured it out, right? But everybody's path is different. I played 1 year of varsity, before I went to LSU. So everybody's path is different. Everybody's running a different race. And so the narcissistic nature is what I want us to do is instead of we have to understand what that is. It's the striving for an ideal. Okay. And when we put everybody's thoughts on an equal platform, we assume that our opinion is the only ones that matter. And our job as coaches is to develop and constantly be in the trust game. We used to show up and say, oh, that's my coach. I trust them because they're my coach. Now they show up and go, okay, that's my coach. Let me call my travel ball coach here and see what do they think of him. Okay. Or coach is changing my batting stance. They call their private coach and say, we worked on this for 8 years. Why are they changing? And now it becomes a conflict between the coaches. Which one is the player going to trust? The one they got the long-standing relationship with.
The connection.
So as a college coach or any coach that you have on your team, you got to work with the players. You got to establish a connection to the players and find what's important to them. What's the one thing? Don't fix something that's not important to them right now. You got to develop the trust with them. Now, that doesn't mean if they say, I'm a shortstop, okay, then you say, okay, you're a shortstop. No, it's like if they want to be a shortstop, then you got to establish the trust and prove to them why they're a better left fielder. Okay? And so sometimes you have to educate them. And sometimes that means I got to set the bench because they're bullheaded and they think they should beat the other shortstop out. And players, I'm going to tell you something, okay? If you're not playing enough, get better. Okay? If you're not playing enough, improve. If you don't like the number of bats you're getting, get better. You won't prove it in a game if you can't prove it in practice. I hate to tell you. That is such a rare phenomenon. If you struggle in practice, you're going to struggle in games. Okay? If you learn to do it in games, you will learn. If you learn to do it in practice, you'll learn to do it in games. Okay? Nobody gets better under more pressure. Okay? Now, that being said, use practice as a way to improve those skills. Okay? And as a coach, putting them in scenarios sometimes and finding out what's important to them, you can use that with them to gain trust. But I find that because our generation, and I don't mean this like us old people and them young people, what I mean is we were raised in a generation where our parents rarely called our teachers. Mm-hmm. Okay? But having kids that are in college, there were times I had to call their teacher. Okay? So our parents should have called our teachers way back when, right? I mean, so, there's some changes there. And how they learn is, I had on Brittany Wagner earlier. I think I was telling you about this from Last Chance U. And we're talking about learning. And Brittany was like, I don't know if you guys watched Last Chance U, but she was the academic counselor. And she was on my podcast earlier today. And we were talking about learning. And she said, it's okay if you're dribbling a basketball while you learn. She said, with quarterbacks and wide receivers, I used to give them a football and quiz them on their tests because they had a better sense of learning when they were playing with their sport in their hands. They can remember. So I think the thing is, we in our generation has to be more adaptable to them. You can communicate some hard questions with a player or challenge them sometimes or give them a lot of encouragement through a simple text message. You don't have to bring them into your office and talk to them because face-to-face communication is not what it used to be. Okay. You can also use emojis. You can use different factors like that are helpful. I mean, I think if you get on Snapchat or something, it's probably weird, but if you have a Snapchat coaches, it's nothing wrong with that. But you got to. I mean, TikTok maybe. Okay, but point is, you got to speak their language. Okay, and it's our job to adapt. Their innovation, the world of their innovation, has rapidly fast forwarded. I mean, when was the iPhone invented? I mean,
we're on 12 or 11.
Yeah,
so 13 years.
Oh, not even that long. Let me see. First iPhone was 2007. So yeah, 11 years. Okay, but for this generation, that's all they've ever known.
Right.
I mean, I remember when my oldest child went to 6th grade, she got a phone. My youngest one went to 2nd grade, she got a phone. You know how my youngest one got a phone in 2nd grade is she had an iPod Touch and she hacked it and made it a phone and a texting machine. And I'm like, all right, you're in 2nd grade, you're hacking that, you're getting a phone. Now I can watch and see what you're doing. I mean, I wasn't frustrated. I thought it was funny. She hacked it. We don't have cable TV anymore. Everything's on demand. You want to watch a movie, you look it up. If there it is, you don't have to go to the video store and hope it's in. Okay? So my point is we have to be better coaches that way too. And we have to find a way to connect to them to gain their trust. And by gaining their trust, then you can push at other times.
They want you to respect them beyond their athletic ability. They want you to know them as a person. Is that a good statement?
Yeah, I mean, our coaches before did too, but it was different, right? There was a hierarchy that you followed. It was not common to see a sophomore beat out a senior. The sophomore would have to wait their turn.
Mm-hmm.
Now in today's game, the sophomore is going to play. The senior's going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, best on the field. Absolutely.
Best play.
Let's do this. Let's open it up for questions. I want to give some people some opportunity. So if you want to go ahead and submit your questions, I've got the chat open. So I've got a question here. It says, do you think that there must be an environment of adversity in order to bring individual players together? An environment of adversity to bring individual players together.
It helps. It helps. We used to use an idea of hold the rope, which is this idea that if you were hanging off the edge of a cliff, who would you want to be holding the rope on the other side? And the question is anybody on your team, because nobody's going to let you down. But what I've always tried to tell people is that a rope is built by the individual fibers woven together to become stronger as one. There's only 2 ways you can break a rope or destroy it. And most people say burn it. Well, the reality is if you ever use nylon rope to fix batting cages, you got to burn the ends of them to cinch them together.
Right.
Okay. The fact is you can either unwind the rope and the twine and you'll never put it back together, or you cut it and it unwinds that way. So it's either something on the inside unwinds us or something on the outside. And I think adversity always helps, but I don't want to create false adversity just to break people down, to find people to come together. What I want to see is challenge. I want to see, adversity. If we're talking about adversity like a challenge to push through, yes. But as a coach, we have to be the guide. The webinar I did last night, which was about, think about coming out of this COVID time with the idea that we're climbing a mountain and we've got Sherpas and guides around us, climbing Mount Everest. We all have the idea of where we're going, which is the base. It was the top of the mountain. But really, really good climbers know that midway up the mountain, you're going to start hurting, hating that you're there, your misery. And it's okay to admit that it sucks, okay? But you just keep pushing. So that kind of adversity, being prepared for adversity helps. I think when adversity happens in games, it can be a very unifying moment, but it can also be a very divisive moment. I'll tell you a story. We went into my senior year, we were number one in the country, and we had the best pitching staff in the country, and we were really, really, really good, obviously. And we go to Ole Miss, and Coach decided, this is right when Outback was starting. So Coach decided to take us into an Outback in Jackson, Mississippi on the way to Oxford. We were going to get an upgrade from a cafeteria, okay? And we got there an hour early, and the guy was an LSU grad, whatever. He opens it up, and he puts all these things out on the table, all these bloomin' onions. And then the next night during the game, everybody starts vomiting. It was like Stand By Me, okay? And Saturday's game, we had a pitcher playing second base. Our coach didn't even barely manage the game. I didn't go to the game. I mean, it was awful, okay? We won 2 out of 3 that weekend. No, we lost 2 or 3 that weekend. We lost 2 out of 3 of 5 of the last 6 weekends of that team, of that season. Because that adversity hit, and in all honesty, and as much as I love my coach, he panicked because we hit a rough spot and he didn't trust our team. Almost that same team minus 4 or 5 players went on to win back-to-back national titles.
So you go from number one, you hit an adverse situation, and everything falls apart.
We fell apart.
Okay, let's see. What are some ways that you help athletes separate their results from their identity?
It's hard, right? I mean, the easy answer is we say, oh, yeah, your game isn't what you do. I think instead what we try to do is we try to do more outside the game. We try to make a better impact on our teammates. We try to make a better impact on our fans. If there's a young kid watching you, talk to them. Here's the thing, right? When you go to a hotel, who makes your stay at a hotel worthwhile?
That person you see right at the front.
Nope.
And that's who does it for me. My first impression.
I'll give you a bigger one than that.
Okay. The little note when you get in your room.
Who cleans your room?
There you go.
It's the person when you walk
in. Yep.
I mean, you can stay at a budget motel, but if the person cleaning your room cares enough about you that they'll never meet to make sure that there's no hair in the sink and there's no hair in the bathtub, that makes a difference, okay? Now, it is driven by the person at the front desk, but they still have a choice to make. Right. Am I here to do my best, or am I just going to do enough to get by?
Right.
Okay, so if you could see your life is bigger than your sport, but your sport does contribute to it. Look, we wear our gear. The Alabama A fell off of this one, but this is an Alabama jersey, right? Or it's a thing. I've got LSU stuff on the wall. I got my jerseys on the wall out there. I got my Alabama championship stuff. I got my Bama softball ring. I've got everything in here, right? It's what we define as ourselves, as our identity a little bit. That's okay, but we're bigger than that identity, right? One thing I've been around a lot of very, very successful and professional athletes, and when I'm around, like, you gotta know who's authentic and not. And I'll have a lot of people who will say, "God, you work with so and so, they're such an ass," okay? But when I get to know them, I'm like, not at all. I work for a player, a young kid who's number 2 or 3 in the world right now, maybe 2, maybe 3. I'm not sure what he is. And John is he's an intense Spaniard in the game of golf, right? And he really, when he's doing a practice round, there's people always asking for autographs. And he doesn't like to do them because it gets him out of his purpose. Other players will walk by and sign, and John will say, "Hey, I'll sign afterwards." And people always get mad. And he's going. He's like, "I don't understand why people are mad at me." And I said, because they don't know you. They don't know that he'll stand outside of this autograph zone for 2.5 hours and sign every single autograph that people ask him for. But a guy who's asking him in the middle of his work to stop and sign an autograph to go sell on eBay, it ticks him off. Mm-hmm. And so what we've done is we've told him, we said, look, people don't know you. You're Spaniard. But the American public is going to like you because you're married to an American woman. Like, you call America home now. but they're going to hate you because in the Ryder Cup, which is USA versus Europe, you're going to destroy them. And they're going to hate you. You're going to be the villain. So we said, do this. When people are asking you for autographs, grab a young kid outside the ropes and say, come on in here and sign his hat and walk with him in the fairway. Everybody there will be like, look at that dude. He is the nicest guy. Okay, that kid, you made his day. Okay, we forget who's looking up to these girls. See, you just assume that you look up to the girls in Alabama or Texas A&M or Texas or wherever, and you think, oh, look at them. You're going to be there one day. But there's somebody who's watching you too.
That's a great example. And it's a win-win for him because it's not some adult selling it on eBay. It's
100%.
A one-on-one interaction that's going to be caught by something and somewhere.
Well,
and
like
he's
you
the good guy.
Well, like you said, the PGA Tour. The PGA Tour is funny, right? They're like no autographs on the golf course during practice rounds, and then there's people are out there standing right next to the guards, and they're like, "Hey, can I get an autograph?" And the players get put in a terrible situation. But I don't blame the fans. But if the fans would go to where they're supposed to go, those people will sign autographs all day long.
Let's see. So one of the questions here, what is the best way to develop your leaders?
Train them. The mistake that most coaches and leaders make is that we try to become the leader or coach that inspired us. Mm-hmm. But we lose who we truly are by doing that.
Right.
Okay. Leaders need to be taught how to lead. It's like an organization that promotes the best salesperson to the lead of sales. They're the best salesperson. They may not be the best leader of salespeople. The best players aren't the best coaches. Sometimes the best leaders aren't the best leaders. Or sometimes your best leader is not your best player. Just because a kid's hitting 450 doesn't mean they're a leader. Okay? You can have a lot of influencers.
Absolutely.
That's okay.
Absolutely. There's a role to play. Leadership isn't centered around necessarily one person or a captain. It can be a role that each play in some certain way, certain fashion by where they influence.
That's right.
All right. How do you bridge the gap of a player who is not mentally willing to buy into the culture of the program?
You got to find a common ground. There's different types of players, which I'm not going to go into this, but there are certain people who are antagonistic or dismissive. And you have to understand, if they understand what you're teaching them and they don't agree with you, that's what I call an antagonist. They just have a different philosophy than you. But the dismissive doesn't agree with you and really doesn't know what they're talking about. They just don't want to be willing to learn. So you have to find a common ground even outside of that. The antagonist you can actually empower and say, well, teach me what you think. Okay? Like a pitcher. A perfect example. I've had pitchers who have come to Alabama, and Stephanie Van Brakel's probably one of the best pitching coaches in the country. Okay? I agree. People come in there and they're like, well, I've always done it this way. And I'm like, Stephanie has like All-American after All-American after All-American, and she was an All-American. Okay? She creates All-Americans. But sometimes she has to find an olive branch there. And maybe their sophomore year, she'll start working that in. And I had a player who was like, fighter, just fought him nonstop. Because I do a lot of work with the pitchers. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, this player just had a 180. Okay, what it was Stephanie didn't fight her. She actually, it's like a donkey. You can get behind a donkey all day long and push on it. That donkey is not moving. You put a little carrot in front of it, you can take it wherever you want. Sometimes you have to figure out what that carrot is. Sometimes you may start off a different way, but you'll get back there. You've got the bigger picture with a player, and you have to educate them on what your plan is for them. Sometimes it's just what it is.
So is all in a reality?
I'd rather them be all in on vulnerability. Look,
that's a great way to say it. All in on vulnerability.
Yeah, I think, and that's okay. I can disagree with you and still be fully vulnerable because I shared my opinion with you, right? But I think as a team, as an organization, not everybody's going to be all in. The player who's the fifth outfielder, probably not all in.
You talk about the personalities of the teams that won national championships.
100%.
With you.
Yeah, we had players that transferred after the year because they weren't playing enough. Okay? But when you got to the very end, then people were all in. But all the way there, they had their own issues. Okay? And that's just the personality of who we are. If you look at what LSU football did this year, they made a commitment as a team before the season to limit outside activities to make sure that they won the honor, like they were all in this year. Okay, that was special. Okay. Are they going to be all in next year? Well, you got guys that get different plans. Okay. They asked Bill Walsh after he won his first Super Bowl. Right? Must be great because you're coaching a lot of people, to coach players that have won Super Bowls. And he goes, no, it's brutal coaching players that have won Super Bowls because they've already got the biggest prize. Mm-hmm. Now they want bigger contracts, more playing time. They want bigger roles. They want to make a legacy. They want to start their foundations. Okay. It's really hard to be singular focused. So it's really hard to tell the player who's sitting on the bench. Like my sophomore year in high school, I used to catch batting practice before every summer league game. My summer league coach was a musician who sang Judy in Disguise. John Fred Gurrier, John Fred and the Playboys. It was a number one hit for like 9 weeks. Okay, he opened for the Beatles, he opened for Elvis Presley, and he would have to leave during the season to go play gigs. And we would take batting practice every day. We were really good. I mean, we had about 10 SEC players on that squad. And we ended up winning the next year, we ended up winning like the Dixie World Series or something. But I wasn't good enough to play. And so every game, I caught batting practice before the game. Now, this is South Louisiana. This is 2:30 to 4:30 every day before a game.
Hot.
Very hot. I had nothing in me. And so I got to pitch 4 times that summer. But I never pitched against good teams. I beat a good team one time, and then I threw one more time and threw a no-hitter against not a very good team. I did well in another game. And then in the playoffs, I got beat. And I remember, I was so angry. Even my dad played college baseball, and he was like, look, you're getting bypassed. You're better. But it wasn't about quitting. It was about owning it. I didn't like the position I was in, but I didn't ever want to be in that position again. But I can guarantee you, I knew my role. And I'll tell you this, when we went to the World Series in 93, my second time, we had a second baseman who was my roommate. Second baseman's in the College Baseball Hall of Fame. If you watch SEC baseball, his name was Todd Walker, and he's one of the best college baseball players to ever play the game. Played 12 years in the major leagues. And Todd was a superstar. And he and I were roommates for 3 years. And we go to the World Series, and that year I was supposed to be the third starter on the pitching staff, and I hurt my shoulder. So I ended up pitching 10 innings. So I'm at the World Series, but I'm not going to pitch in a game because I'm just not good enough. I'd lost my mechanics. It was just a disaster. I threw 10 innings that year. And I'm in there throwing batting practice before the game in the shell out behind. We'd gone to a high school to take BP. Now we were taking BP at the field in the shell that they had. And he walks out, and this just tells you what mistakes we make. I'm throwing BP, and I'm in the thing, and it's hot. I'm miserable, and I'm getting just pelted by balls. And he hits his rounds, and he gets out. And I go, dude, you're not going to help me pick up? And he looks at me and goes, you got to remember why you're here.
Yeah, there's the role and a stark reminder.
It hurt because, first of all, that was like my brother. And I was like, dude, but he was right. Mm-hmm. My role was there to throw batting practice and to get him ready. Not to be like, dude, you got to help me. My job was to get him ready for the game. I was not going to pitch in the game. I ended up winning the World Series, and he was the most valuable player.
That can be a difficult truth.
It is true.
Let's see. What is the best conversation to have with your team or yourself internally after a disappointing performance? Do you talk about the improvements or do you talk about moving forward?
I think sometimes after a bad performance, the best thing to do is just to say, hey, you know what? Bad day. I think after a good game, that's the best day to teach. After a bad game, everybody's dealing with it on their own way, okay? And I think a lot of times coaches dig in at that time. Nobody's really paying attention. Everybody's got their own sorrow going. Sometimes the best thing to do is say, hey, look, we'll meet tomorrow. We'll get it back, okay? Let's 24-hour this one. Let's get out of this. Let's get out of here, okay? Make sure, you tell your mom and dad thanks. If you can be a better leader. Now, if somebody's out there and they're fighting hard and they get beat, it's one thing. If somebody just lays an egg out there, it happens. But our worst chewings came after games that we beat somebody that we should have destroyed. And that was the best teaching because you had a little bit of confidence, but you were willing to listen. But after a tough game, if you put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, the last thing I want to do is be chastised. Mm-hmm. So as a coach, what I would rather you do is say, hey, look, we got beat. There's some reasons we got beat. And those things that we've talked about, those were the things that beat us. But you know what? We'll talk about that tomorrow. Right now, let's just sit in this for a little bit. Okay? And you know what? Sun comes up tomorrow. We're going to make the corrections, and we're going to get back after it.
New day, new day.
We don't need to go on Yelp all the time and complain about a restaurant that had bad service.
It's one of those things of having that gut feeling and knowing the right moment. I see so many coaches just turn to that because they want to express their emotion, not really understanding the team's emotion. And then they all of a sudden become the star of the show instead of recognizing what's going on in front of them.
Well, and I think one of the things too is that coaches, I give my coach a lot of credit, and Coach Saban does this. They take notes during the game, okay? Because we never want our emotions to drive our perception. So you can keep a notebook with you, or you can keep a sheet with you. Just take notes. And he would go out there and he'd read something. Some of the things he'd be like, he wouldn't read it because he probably wrote it down and he was ticked off. It's like, it's not that important.
Yeah, when it's all said and done.
Not that important. And he would formulate his thoughts before he talked to his team. You got to remember, too, as coaches with youth players, it's going to go back to the parents. So you got to show them that you're the captain of the ship, that you can handle the good and the bad, and you can navigate them through this.
That's also part of the connection process, too, isn't it? 100%. Earning trust, absolutely. So let's see, we'll have a couple more questions, and then we'll cut this off. So how do you suggest building a growth mindset with teams that don't have an opportunity for a ton of time together? A very relevant question right now. With teams who aren't able to be on a field together, everything is virtual. How do you still reinforce and teach that proper mindset, that high performance mindset when you're not together?
There's so many ways to connect today. One of the things you can do as a team is you can send out, look, between the resources of ESPN 60, ESPN 30 for 30s, 60 Minutes articles, TED Talks, Players Tribune articles. There's so many things in podcasts. You can say, look, everybody take a listen to this in your own time. And then have a meeting where even over this, where you sit and chat about it. That's okay. Our connection is going to be formed in so many ways. We can connect in ways that we can connect and feel close to people without having to be physically in the same room.
So we'll close out with this question, and it's a follow-up from the first question. So what if that common ground, what if you can't find the common ground and the player is not willing to work at it? In other words, you're at an impasse.
So I had a case like that this year. I had a coach that took over a college basketball program. Coach had won 3 titles in the last 3 years. Takes over a high-profile thing. Players pretty much like, you're not my coach, and we just didn't want to be in that situation. Coach wanted to install his process, wanted to make sure that the younger players understood his system. And I said, look, Coach, you have a choice. Either you go head-to-head with that guy every single day, or you get 2 steps ahead of him. And we developed a plan for how to manage them. They won conference. Okay? And that player even bailed out in one of the biggest games and just had an injury. I said, Coach, that guy doesn't want to be coached. He's afraid of the big moments. Well, what happened was Coach developed a superstar that played alongside. And guess what started happening? As the other superstar started playing better, who all of a sudden started getting healthier? Couldn't stand it. But he liked him. So it wasn't like it was an adversarial thing. But what Coach did is he managed it so beautifully that now, after the season, that guy's gone. He graduated. So now what's he doing? He's installing his new system once they can get back to coaching.
Right.
And he called me and he was like, dude, I would have gone head-to-head with that guy all day long. He said, you told me not to, and I got to thank you. He said, because we wouldn't have won conference without that. He said, that guy kept me up at night every single night. He just came in to be a pain in my butt.
That's disciplined. A
tremendous
amount of discipline.
Oh, God. I mean, but at the same time, that same player is probably going to come back in 10 years and tell him thank you.
Right. He connected with him at some point, and it started to work.
Boy, it did take a lot of discipline, though.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dr. McCabe, I want to sincerely thank you for being a part of this event this evening.
Absolutely.
What a fun talk. What a fun opportunity for me to grow. And I know the others participating as well. Friends, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to go to BhrettMcCabe.com, and it's spelled BHRETTMCCABE
I'll put it on the
.com.
And I'm going to tell you, there's another thing here. Okay. If you go to this website, I'm going to send you two. I want the coaches to go to this one. If you go to one called the Catalyst School,
Yes.
we're actually, and if you go on there and you put in your email address, you'll get free content, a ton of free content. The Catalyst School is where we're developing catalysts, which catalysts are coaches, leaders, managers, developers of the next generation. Anybody who's responsible for the growth of another human being. We call them catalysts in our office. My teammate in the office is a guy by the name of Bhrett McCabe. He has his master's in organizational leadership. He worked at the University of Alabama's athletic department for 4 years in leadership. He was an all SEC catcher at Ole Miss. He played in the minor leagues. He helped coach Team USA. He gets it. So we're launching the Catalyst School in May. It's going to have a combination program. It's going to have a master class, but it's also going to have what we call Catalyst Live, which is weekly calls just like this. And it's going to be less than $20 a month for that. And it's 100% developed on our system of the way that coaches coach. And if you go on that website, there's a link that says interviews, and there's going to be literally so many amazing interviews. Murph's on there, Kat Osterman's on there, Bob Bowman, who's the coach of Michael Phelps, is on there, Dana Duckworth's on there, Ryan Holiday, who wrote The Obstacle of the Way, is on there. Unbelievable videos and content that are coming out on a regular basis, in addition to my regular podcast. So they're blended. It's not either or. You can get to them from both places. But from a coaching standpoint, I really believe that we're going to have the best coaching platform in the country in about a month.
And this is something I know you have invested so much time and work into.
Yeah.
So it's going to be another great resource. Absolutely. So thank you for putting both of the websites on there. If any of y'all have any other questions for Dr. McCabe, don't hesitate to send them to me, and I'll forward as well. But I want to thank all who participated. The goal of Charge Up is to pay it forward. The goal of Charge Up is to be a resource for not only your growth, but for the growth of those you lead. So thank you, Dr. McCabe. Thank you, everybody who joined us. Have a great evening. Don't forget, my friends, Charge Up.
Thank you.